And welcome to today's workshop on graduate applications in gender studies. As you know, we've started to do a workshop series on graduate applications in different subjects. We've covered a few last weekend and have a few more workshops on different subjects this weekend, and we'll continue to do so for the next few weeks. So very quickly, we at Project EduAccess, we believe that access to higher education, leadership, and professional opportunities is a privilege that most people from marginalized communities are systematically denied through cost, information, and dispositional barriers. And we try to improve inclusivity in some of these spaces by removing these barriers for marginalized communities in the global South. We do this by adopting 4 key interventions, such as mentoring, counseling, role modeling, information advice and guidance, capacity building, leadership skill development, and evidence-based advocacy. I'll very quickly introduce you to your panelists, and then we'll take you over gender studies as a master's program and as a PhD program, and then talk to you about just generally some career prospects and give you tips when you are making an application, and then we'll move to a Q&A. So we have with us currently just one wonderful panelist, and hopefully Pooja will join us soon, who have been with us at Project EduAccess for a while, and we're really grateful for their support. So Nehal did the MA in Gender Studies from SOAS University of London. Pooja did the MA in Gender Politics and International Relations from University College Dublin, and is currently doing a PhD in Politics and International Relations from University of Chicago. And I'm Misbah. I'm also one of the panelists. I did my master's in women's gender and sexuality studies from University of Oxford, and I'm currently doing my PhD in law. So thank you, Nehal, for joining us, and I will hand it over to you now.
Thank you so much, Misbah, for that introduction, and welcome everybody. I am Nehal. What I'll do is I'll quickly walk you through some of the slides, which will give you a general idea about what gender studies and masters in gender studies entails. So gender studies, as a field of study, is particularly very broad, which is to say that it sort of picks and draws from a lot of different fields of study, and it explores a lot of intersectional issues, which is to do with capitalism, colonialism, imperialism, race, caste, class, and it also draws from different fields of study. So, for instance, my thesis work was drawn a lot from the fields of sociology and anthropology. I know friends who worked a lot on law or, use some philosophical theories to build upon their areas of interest. So it's also pretty broad in terms of that aspect. So that is one part of it. And a lot of people sort of also go on to work in different fields after they've done gender studies. So some people work in policy making, some people go on to work in NGOs. I myself, I'm working in higher ed at this point of time, at the intersection of gender and with the lens of diversity and inclusion. There's some other people who go on to academia and research, like Misbah, Pooja. They've gone on to do a PhD now. So I think that there are different fields in terms of different opportunities that you can explore post your master's in gender studies. So yeah, that's largely the overview for the master's course. Misbah, can we move to the next slide, please? Yes, thank you. So yeah, so it has some core modules like the slide says. So for instance, at SOAS we did a module on gender theory, what it and I mean, for instance, through my course, I was very fortunate because we drew a lot from critical race theory and critical Black feminist. So we did a lot along the lines of the intersection of race, imperialism, capitalism, colonialism, gender, sexuality, and how sort of all of these compounds towards the different inequalities that functions in the world. And also, uh, okay, somebody mentioned that they don't think that the slide is visible. I mean, I can see it. Okay, okay. So I just feel like, okay. So Okay, I think Madiha, that's something. Maybe you can log out and log in and see if this still works for you. So yeah, continue. So yeah, so I think that's one bit of it. Then there are various other modules, and then you can pick and choose, especially in the context of UK, and I can speak in the context of UK. Like a lot of people do certain specialized tracks as well, right? Like some people do modules which are heavier on gender and development. Some people do modules which are heavier on like gender related to like gender and law. I did a lot of modules which were around the intersectionality of transness, queerness, borders, migrations, because that was particularly my area of interest. So I feel like, I mean, gender studies as a course offers you a lot of lens to think through things. I wouldn't look at it as a course which trains you in one particular discipline, but rather gives you a lens to critically engage with a lot of different disciplines. For instance, through my 1 year of training, I know that I can critically engage with law, but I don't necessarily have a legal specialization to be able to analyze that law, but I can critically look and engage with that law. Similarly with media, similarly with cinema, similarly with different sort of happenings around the world with regards to white liberal feminism, what's happening, the developments in queer theory in India, in the US, the different debates around sex workers, rights of sex workers. I feel like, or the different rights around disability, the different debates and disability studies. So I feel like gender studies have just given me the lens to be able to look at a lot of these things. So I enter gender studies with that mindset to be able to gain that lens rather than being like, oh, I know that this is, like this is the kind of specialization that I'm really interested in, and I would like to become like a law specialist or like a policy specialist, because that's not something that gender studies necessarily offers, but it does offer you a lot of important and responsible lens to be able to critically deal with these fields of area. Again, it has a dissertation module, so different colleges offers. I mean, I know that almost all MA programs across different countries would expect you to produce a thesis work at the end of it, and originally, the expectation is for you to build on some sort of ongoing research or do some primary research, or pick up a field of study, be it anthro, socio, philosophy, like I mentioned earlier, and then develop on an area of research that you're really interested in. And usually, this is a longer piece of work. So, for instance, at SOAS, I was expected to write a thesis of about 12,000 words. Some colleges expect you to write longer, shorter, like maybe 10,000, 15,000. So that surely depends. Again, like I mentioned, that some colleges have specialization as well. Like it's mentioned on the slide, like for LSC, there's like MSc Globalization Gender Development. Again, for SOAS as well, there was something called Masters in Development and Gender Studies, Law and Gender. So I think it really sort of depends. And these are again specialized tracks, and they have different sort of modules. But again, I know a lot of colleges are super flexible, that you can take up different modules across different sort of courses. So a lot of my friends who were doing gender and law did end up auditing courses on like gender theory, although that wasn't a core course for them, but they did end up doing it. So I think that sort of flexibility is there, but I would really suggest that you do your research at your own end and talk to people from specific colleges that you're interested in and look at this flexibility, because it really depends from college to college. So yeah, that's there. Yeah, I think we can move to the next slide. Again, the nomenclature might vary. For instance, I know that Oxbridge offers courses around MPhil a lot more, and there are other colleges in the UK which also offers courses on MSc. For instance, LSC or even UCL has courses around MSc and not MA. SOAS was an exception; it had a course on MA Gender Studies. So it really depends. MSc, MPhil and MSc are more research heavy. MPhil specifically because it's a shorter duration course. At both Oxford and Cambridge, it's a 9-month course. So, for instance, I got offers from, I was sort of stuck between my offers for Cambridge and SOAS. And the reason I ended up choosing SOAS over Cambridge was simply because I did not want to do a very research heavy course, because I did not have a formal training on gender as a field of study. And that is why I ended up choosing a course on gender studies, because I knew that it's going to give me all of those sort of theoretical foundational understandings, which I feel an MPhil course still would, but it's a much more research heavy and sort of academically packed course where you go onto the research track. It's for 9 months. You do a lot of work on your own and in close proximity with your supervisor in developing the kind of research that you are interested in. So I think that's with MPhil. I don't think I can speak about MSc that much, but from what I've heard, and maybe Misbah, you can jump in on this, but I feel like MSc and MA are much more closer to each other. I think MPhil is what is sort of slightly different from these two, because that's what I've seen friends at LSE and UCL do. Like their tracks were pretty similar to my track. So yeah, is there anything else?
No, maybe I can just add to what you were saying. So I think the MSc, MA, MPhil sort of uh, Nehal's right that MPhil is quite different compared to an MSc and MA. But what would be good to see is also within the sort of MA and MSc, which is what is the disciplinary scope of the course, and which department is it housed, or which department is it housed in? So, a master's in women and gender studies in a humanities department may be very different from a women's studies in offered from a social science department or division. So be mindful of that as well, because that will determine the kind of disciplinary training that you get from the course as well. So I did the master's in women's gender and sexuality studies, which was offered by the humanities department. So it had a very humanities focus. But if you are somebody who's coming from a social science background who does more social science work, then maybe finding a course that's within that department would be more helpful.
Yeah, all right, amazing. So yeah, thank you for that, Misbah. And I think, yeah, US again, for instance, as it's mentioned, has like more specialized and independent courses. So for instance, a lot of these great universities like New School or Emeroy, they would offer specifically courses on like gender or like sexuality studies. And although I would like to think that they often end up overlapping with each other, like you cannot study gender without studying sexuality or like vice versa. And you kind of use very similar disciplinary lens to engage with these two studies. Like you would have to use queer theory, trans studies, disability studies. You will have to ultimately use all of these lens to sort of engage with either of the two. But yeah, again, it would be useful if you sort of delve deeper individually into the kind of program that you're interested in and look at their website and the kind of disciplinary leaning that they have and everything else. So yeah, so that's one thing. What else? I think, yeah, that's more or less about it. Have I missed anything? I don't think so. Yeah, I think we're good. Yeah, choosing your country. I mean, for me, it was a choice about which offers you funding over anything else. But just for like a bit of an idea, UK offers a shorter term course, which is like a 1 year program. SOAS was a fully 12-month program, but like I said that LSC would have somewhere around a 10-month program, a 10 to 11-month program. Yeah, I think it's 11-month program. Exactly. They start in September and they end in August. Oxford and Cambridge have again shorter programs, especially their MPhil programs are again shorter. US, again, it's a 2 year program. Focus on interdisciplinary applications. Again, I don't think I have that sort of background. Maybe Misbah, when you jump in after this, you can elaborate on this a little more because I was very clear about my focus. I wanted to come either to the UK or to different European countries. So I did not research about US much, except for maybe a few colleges like Chicago and things like that. But again, like the field of study was slightly different there. Again, Europe, that's true that they have more regional focus. But again, there are certain colleges in Europe, for example, CEU or Utrecht, which offers a lot more broader programs. But again, if you look at their modules, they would have a lot more modules which are sort of a bit more centered around their regionality and also slightly more Eurocentric. And that's also one of the reasons why I sort of distanced myself from those programs. Because I mean, if that's something that you're looking to do, if you're interested in like a European or like a regional sort of area of interest, then I think they would make great programs for you. So yeah, that's about it, I think, from my end. Yes. Okay. Is that something that I'm taking? Okay. Okay. Okay, choosing your university. Yeah, program specialization. I think I've been iterating this over and over, and I think you sort of need to understand what sort of research you're interested in, what sort of work that you want to do after this, and what are you looking to get out of your master's program. I think these three questions are very, very important to ask before you step into a master's program and when you're choosing your university, right? So, for instance, I was very sure that I was interested in the fields of like socio and anthro, and I was also interested in schools which were looking at certain pedagogical methods. So, for instance, critical race theory, or which draws a lot from like trans disability studies and sort of explores these intersections. And also South Asian studies. There are very few colleges that do that, though. I mean, even though I studied from SOAS, we barely had modules which specialized in that. Although I did end up taking a few modules, but like gender and South Asia was not something that was explored in depth, but that was also something I was in the lookout for, right? So that is something that you need to see, that does it sort of cater to your area of interest. It doesn't leave you hanging in the sense that you have to do a lot of, I mean, you'll still have to do a lot of work on your own, but even then, like, does it give you the push and the sort of lens, if at the least, or the theoretical framework to be able to critically engage with the kind of research or the kind of work that you would want to do post your master's, or does it serve the purpose of you entering into that master's? Second, faculty expertise. Again, from my personal experience, it was super important for me. I saw that a lot of my faculty members came from like either the Middle East, or were Indians, or were people who were specializing in critical race theory. And that was specifically very, very important for me. Because that was the kind of like theoretical bent that I was interested in, right? So you need to see that the kind of research that you're doing does are there is there are the faculty members which do that. And honestly, all of the websites, especially for UK, I can attest, like most colleges have faculty profiles up on their website. Like, go to the specific field of study, look up for the faculty, and you will be able to see, like, the different profiles of different faculty members up there. So I think that's a good way for you to also see and check if there are people who sort of fit within your area of research interest. QS ranking, again, it's a good thing. I did not care about it that much, and I would have a rather contentious opinion about it because it depends on a lot of different factors. I mean, a lot of these parameters I am not aware of, but I was slightly wary of this because I also take it with a pinch of salt that it does have certain colonial underpinnings to it as well, right? So that's there. But that being said, of course, like, depends on what sort of, like, of course, a degree from Oxford and Cambridge in the real practical world would have a lot more weightage than, let's say, a degree from any other college in the UK, right? Also, and if they serve all the other purposes for you, then I think that's a great way to go. And also, given that you get into these universities as well, right? So that's there. But like, I did not care about QS rankings as well. But if you do, you can go up on the internet and you can just pull out the QS ranking, and it's just out there. And there are subject specific QS rankings as well. You will get, like, okay, you can see QS rankings, UK, or like QS rankings. It's usually for the world, so you can see, okay, but it's also like region specific. Like, you can say for the UK or for Europe, like, you can see all of that and you can figure out for yourself that, if that's something that's of importance to you. Facilities, again, I think this is super, super important. And I think I neglected this. But this is like really important. Like, what sort of support does the university provide you, right? Like, in terms of administrative support as well. Like, just to be very honest, I went to SOAS, but it was an administratively difficult college to deal with, right? Because it doesn't have the sort of resources to be able to support students administratively. So it was also very strenuous for a lot of people around me to be able to navigate the system there, right? So what sort of facilities does the university provide? In terms of administration. Second, in terms of, does it help you with like resources, with like helping, like, in terms of helping you explore what the next steps in your career could look like. So for instance, a lot of these colleges have a lot of these sessions around, like, okay, how to apply for PhD, or like put you in touch with people like they have these bases of networking that are available for you. None of the colleges I know in the UK would directly have campus hiring, but they do roll out opportunities in terms of, jobs and the kind of openings that they are. And I think that a lot of these have like dedicated career cells for them. So it is good to look at that as well. But in addition to that, it's also good to look at the kind of archives and stuff. So let's say if you're interested in like a particular kind of research, a lot of different colleges have like different archives. So for instance, I know that in SOAS, we had a center and an archival center that was dedicated for a lot of primary material that was preserved in the university library for like the India's women's movement, and the sort of like newspaper correspondence that happened during that time between 1960s to 1980s, right? And that was very amusing. I didn't know about it before I entered, but like all of this information is available out there on their website, right? So if you're interested in like a particular kind of research, then that's great. Again, if you choose university, also, I think that one other thing that matters is your kind of city also. I know a lot of people ended up choosing London as a city simply because of resources as well, because there's something called like the British Library, and then they had access to a lot of like research material in addition to like a lot of other things as well. So I think, but like not to digress, but like, yeah, so I think these are some things that you should sort of keep in mind before you try and make a choice for the kind of university you would want to apply into and you'd want to pay an application fees for. So yeah, just that. Over to you, Misbah. You're on mute. I was on mute and I was saying that you were on
Sorry.
mute.
Sorry. I was saying Pooja was supposed to join us, but it seems like she won't be able to. And so it's going to be me, and of course, Nehal, feel free to jump in whenever, especially I think we're still doing the master slide. So I don't think there's anything new here for me to add that's not already been covered by Nehal. I think, how you decide which masters you want to do more generally depends on your interest. A master's in gender studies or women and gender studies is a very specific master's, and in India you don't get offered a bachelor's in this, you don't get offered a master's in this, although some universities do. So of course, the the only way for you to figure out or demonstrate that this is something of interest to you is through different activities that you might have engaged in, or different in projects you may have done, internships you may have taken up, or modules you may have taken up in your undergrad or masters as well. So if you see yourself inclining towards that, then a master's in women's studies or gender studies or sexuality studies might be good for you. And then within that, once you know that you want to do a master's in this, look at what themes within the subject are of interest to you. So initially it used to be just women's studies as a master's, but now you have women's studies, gender studies, sexuality studies. And I think most of the places now it's titled women's gender and sexuality studies, but some places offer a sexuality studies as a separate master, some offer gender studies, some offer women's studies. So see what you want to study and see the modules that they offer. I think that's primarily where you will be able to decide the masters you want to do. So if you want to focus on queer theory, then look for courses that have a focus on that. Similarly, if you want to do something that relates to gender and law, or you're coming from a legal background, which is where I was coming from, I will look at master's courses that offer law and gender as a module, or allow you to do a dissertation in a more legal topic. So look at those things, because even within the subject of like women's gender and sexuality studies, it really differs university to university, discipline to discipline, department to department. So really find what is of interest to you, and then look for the course, and then of course generally look at what you will gain from it. So if you do a master's in a humanities subject, or a or a social sciences subject, it would really, the kind of skills that you'll pick up would be very different. So look at that as well, something that I would stress on, and primarily and maybe I'm saying this more because I came from a law background and then I did a master's in women's gender and sexuality studies that was in the humanities department, so it was quite a shift for me. Luckily I was able to do the readings because I had, before law school I did my bachelor's in philosophy, which, and so, it was still humanities, but I know that a lot of students who were from a social science background in my cohort really struggle to do with those very humanities, readings and modules that were very focused on English, history, and, research methodology and that. So really see what you want to gain as skills from that master's as well. I think now we're looking at PhD courses. So more broadly, you have PhD courses that range from 3 years to 4 years to 5 to 7 years, where most of your beginning initial years are coursework where you do research methodology and look at critical theories, and then your PhD needs to focus on sort of independent research and should contribute to a field. I think primarily, if you are thinking of doing a master, a PhD, your first search should be finding somebody you do the PhD under. So where do you find the supervisor who's doing the kind of work that you're interested in doing? And reach out to those potential supervisors or professors and ask them if they'd be interested in taking your research. And that process starts a lot earlier than application deadline. So if you are thinking of doing a PhD and if you're thinking of applying now, then you should have already reached out to potential supervisors. And if you're thinking of doing a PhD next, of applying for a PhD next year, then summer onwards is when you should start emailing professors and asking them if they would be interested in taking up a new PhD student. And again, that I think drives a lot of the PhD work. So don't look for, okay, what are the best universities? I want to go to Oxford, I want to go to Harvard. Find who is the best person to supervise your research and see where they're at, and then make applications accordingly. And also their area of focus, also determines a lot of the scope of your PhD as well. One problem with the PhD in gender studies is that it's a relatively new field of study, both as a master's and a PhD, but I think more so as a PhD. So not a lot of universities offer PhD as a PhD in gender studies as a separate a PhD program, but a lot of departments will offer specialization in gender studies or allow you to look at genders related topics in different departments. So in English, in the English faculty, you can do a PhD that is focused on gender, similarly in law, history, or whatever that may be. And then within that, there will be departments or divisions and that have research groups on gender or sexuality studies. And actually, that may be something that you should be looking out for. So if you do a PhD in English that focuses on gender, see whether that university offers anything else other than that PhD on gender, where you still have a cohort of students who are working on similar topics. So yeah, that's something to look out for. Um, how do you choose the country? I mean, first, of course, depends on the number of years you want to do. So a PhD in the US, Canada tend to be a lot longer. So 7 to 6, 7, 8 years. Whereas in the UK and Europe, they're much shorter. They're 3 to 4 years. Um, if you apply to the UK or Europe, to have a master's is really important. Not necessarily in gender studies, but a master's more generally, a master's or an MPhil, because they want students to have training in research methodology, because that's something that they do not give you a lot when you join the PhD program. They'll give you maybe a term or two of coursework with research methodology, and then you directly jump in and do your thesis. Whereas in the US or Canada and Australia as well, there's more focus on providing coursework, and really engaging you in research methodology and focusing on that. Whereas, and then you progress into the PhD. So be mindful of what you sort of already have training in and what you want to do, how much time you want to spend on it, and then of course where your supervisor is based as well. Choosing the program again, first, look at the research focus, so faculty expertise and research projects. So for example, Cambridge has a PhD on gender studies separately. So that's, if you want to focus on gender studies as a PhD, then that's a good place to apply. But if you are okay with doing a PhD in any other department that has a focus on gender studies, then you should definitely see if there's anything else that's going on, if there are any research projects or any research centers that focus on, gender studies or sexuality studies that you can go to or that you will have access to when you're doing your PhD. Second, again, your supervisor is really important, and see where, if say for example you want to do a PhD in equality law, human rights law, and gender. So see where it is that supervisor, that there's people working on that, and see if that's of interest to you. So this may be disciplinary focus, this may be regional focus. If you want to do a PhD that focuses on India or focuses on South Asia, then you also need to find supervisors who have focus on that. But if for you discipline is more important or the theory is more important, then you find supervisors accordingly. But that will again determine a lot of the scope of your PhD. Again, funding and scholarships, see where it is that you will get teaching assistantships, research assistantships, or fellowships, or scholarships to do your PhD, or opportunities to really upskill yourself. And then again, research facilities, wherever it is that, sometimes what happens is that, you may want to go to a university that's more traditional, that has, historically been doing the same kind of research, but because you want that sort of focus. But there are also universities that are doing more radical research, and that's really different, that's new, that's more dynamic. And so, depending on what you want, you should see which university offers that. And these are just some examples again. So Cambridge offers a PhD that has a focus on, gender studies. And then again, there's Utrecht University, I think Nehal also spoke about it, has like a research center, has the Netherlands Research School on Gender Studies. So that's again, where a lot of the focus is going to be on gender studies. So see if, that university has something like that, which will support your PhD. Again, how do you pick your specialization? See what is of interest to you first, and then start your research on universities and supervisors. So really take time to figure out your passion, what you are interested in, ranging both from the topic that you want to do, the lens from which you want to look at, the regional focus, if there may be any, within women's gender and sexuality studies, what is it that you want to do, whether you want to do academia, whether you want to focus on policy, whether you want to focus on human rights, or development, or sorry, or if you want to focus on you want to focus on, say, education and gender. So all of these things, first you need to figure out for yourself what is it that you want to do, and then find where you want to go for it. So you need to have your research question, if not down to the T, but at least you need to have a sense of all of these things. What's the lens, what do I want to do with it, what are my aims, what training do I want to get, what training do I already have. So do that. Then of course you have to identify the research gap and the general recent trends. And of course with gender studies, it is that it is a new field, which means that a lot of new scholarship is coming out on this very frequently, very fast. It's an emerging field. So keep yourself updated with what's happening in that specialization. So now, for example, there's a lot of work that's happening on gender, AI, technology, climate justice, and intersectionality, of course, has already always been there. But see what kind of work is happening, what are the different disciplines that are coming together, and see what gap you want to fill within that broad research framework. Again, faculty expertise and within the department also really determines what you want to do. So for example, like SOAS has a lot of faculty members doing work on post-colonial theory, post-colonial gender studies. So if that's the kind of environment you want to be in, then you choose that. And similarly, Toronto University focuses on queer theory. I think a lot of new scholarship is coming from there on that. So which university, not just in terms of your specific supervisor, but more generally, would focuses on the kind of scholarship you want to be a part of, and what's the kind of environment you want to be a part of as well. Again, I think we discussed this as well, that if you may not find a PhD in gender studies specifically in the university you want to go to, or your supervisor may not be in a gender studies department, but maybe in any other department but focuses on gender. So that may be, again, sociology, media, or law, or anything else. But see what department that may be, and if you can still do a specialization in gender within that. And then again, see what, that's why I recommend, see sort of what you want to do after the PhD, whether you want to do policy work. So then maybe if policy is of interest, then maybe you can do a PhD in, public policy, or any other policy school, and see if there's a focus on gender on that. But if you want to do academia, then, or if you want to focus on education, then do a PhD in the education department with a focus on um, gender studies. So again, sort of depending on what you want to do after the PhD, also you can see what your specialization may be. I think we already discussed career prospects, but really depends on what your interest is, whether you want to do academia, whether that involves, teaching, or even doing research in university centers or research centers or in think tanks. Again, you can do advocacy, policy work with UN bodies or with governments. And again, this is something that a lot of organizations are focusing on now. So as it's an up and coming field, journalism, honestly, anything that you intend to do, because gender studies is such an interdisciplinary course. It really, you can make a career on gender in any field. Nehal, if you have anything to add, feel free to step in here.
No,
Um,
I think no, yeah, I think I sort of agree with what you said, Misbah.
yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to take this slide?
Yes, start your application early, and I can't stress that enough because I feel like a lot of people really sort of delay the whole process, and what ends up happening is that they miss out a lot of scholarships which open up really early on. So again, this is what helped me. Like I used to keep a tracker for myself, and for me it was Excel. Different people use different sort of apps or documents. And I used to keep a track of the different sort of scholarships, both internal and external, which would fit the program that I am intending to apply to. So, and because of which starting early really helped, right? Like talking to people, starting early, keeping an eye out for the different scholarships. So I think that is super important. Second is email the school for application fee waivers. Sometimes these schools have a lot of unjustified application fee that you need to pay. And there's no harm in dropping an email. I ended up dropping emails to a lot of different schools. And while some of them were successful, some of them weren't. But it's always worth a shot. So create an email template and drop them an email saying that, okay, can I get an application fee waiver? Is that a possibility? Right. So check if the school needs an English language test. Don't go out and give an English language test, which requires you to spend close to 20,000 rupees, despite the fact that a lot of you might have English as your language of sort of instruction in your schools or your colleges. So if you have that and you can produce a proof, uh, I think that's better to do rather than go and give a test. And now a lot of schools have also come up with their internal tests, which are much cheaper or which are often free of cost. So always see for those options and give a test only when you think that it's necessary. Yeah, maintain an Excel sheet. This is something that I've already mentioned earlier. Know the future programs, prospects of the program really well. I think that's extremely important. And I'm speaking this from personal experience that, before you step into the program, know what you want to get out of the program. And I have mentioned this earlier, maybe asking yourself questions like, does the program serve the purpose that I intend to achieve? And this could be different things for different people. It could be employability for some of you. It could be research. It could be getting into a PhD. It could be, switching fields. So maybe asking that questions, looking at the career profiles of people who've done this, because a lot of the times, and like take this with a pinch of salt, that going out and studying seems like a very, very glorious option. And it offers you a lot of different opportunities, but also understanding and knowing, especially if you're paying money for that course, right? And which is a lot of money, like understanding and knowing, what would come out of that course and is it what you're intending to achieve through that course is extremely important, right? Because a lot of these courses, you'd have to pay close to 35 lakhs a year, right? And that's just your tuition fee. So sort of understanding that is very, very important. So if you're looking to get an employability or like an employment opportunity within the country itself after that course, understanding, the market, talking to people who have done that course would really help and would give you a sense of reality check, which I feel a lot of people who go into the field of social sciences often don't tend to do that, which is not to discourage you. I feel like I'm extremely happy that I did a course on gender studies, but also like I always advise people who come up to me and be like, should I do this course? I'm like, definitely, but like you should know why you're doing this course and will it serve the purpose, right? And secondly, and I can't stress this enough, does what sort of pedagogy does the school follow, right? That for me personally was very important, and that for me made the course much more holistic and much more dynamic and fulfilling than it was. And it sort of reaffirmed the fact that okay, I chose SOAS because it sort of did serve the kind of understandings and the complex intersectional understandings that I was looking for a course to offer me, right? And which is very difficult, especially to get something out of a course in India, because a lot of these courses would focus a lot on Asian politics, especially in the case of gender, but they would not touch a lot on like trans studies or like disability studies, queer theory, gender, sexuality, race, critical race theory, which again I feel are extremely important, indispensable lenses to engage with, especially when you're doing a course on gender, women, or sexuality studies, or either of them, right? Because you cannot think of these in silos. Again, that's a personal understanding. But yeah, so I think these would be some of my general tips. Misbah, would you like to add anything?
No, honestly, I think you've covered everything. But yeah, I would really, again, as Nehal suggested, really focus, like first think and reflect on why you want to do this, and what's the outcome that you want from the gender studies program, and what is your interest really, and whether that can be fulfilled by a more general master's program or a PhD program, and where you focus on gender, because a lot of master's programs also offer gender specific modules. So is that something you want to do, or whether it is that you want to do a specialization in gender studies and take modules with different disciplines? So I think you need to reflect on what you want and what is your interest before you actually embark on that. But yeah, I think nothing else. Okay, I think if that's that, we can move to the Q&A. I see we already have quite a few questions in chat, and maybe we can start taking that. And in the meantime, if anyone wants to raise their hand and ask a question, you can do that as well, or you can put your questions in chat and we'll read them out. Yeah. So okay, there's a question that's come in my DM. Maybe I can read that. So it says, Does changing disciplines affect a PhD application outcome? Mm. Okay, I'll just take that very quickly. Not really. You can change your disciplines and it's not a problem at all. I think the only thing is to justify why it is that you want to move from whatever your current discipline is in your master's to a PhD. And you need to show that the methodology that you've engaged with in your master's is still relevant for the PhD. I think that's the only thing. But I think more generally, interdisciplinary is always good, and especially abroad, there is this sense of interdisciplinary being good, which we don't have that much in India or South Asia. We think that if you're moving from one discipline to another, you just don't know what you're doing. But here, I think it reflects that you are able to employ different lenses, and I think that's always good.
Misbah, I also have a question on my DM, which is the first question that I received. Maybe we can take that up first and then move ahead. All right, thank you. So there's a question that I received. It says that, hey, could you share a bit about how you funded your master's at SOAS? I was on a scholarship called Shevening. So that is one of the scholarships, and it's a fully funded scholarship. You get a living stipend as well. So that sort of made my life much easier. But there are a lot of different scholarships. I think Project EduAccess has done a lot of webinars in the past about each of these specific scholarships, right? Like Rhodes, Shevening. Misbah, you're a Rhodes scholar, right? If I'm not wrong. Yeah, so like Rhodes, Chevening, a Commonwealth, Felix, like literally everything. So I would really encourage that you go out there on Project EduAccess website and go through the different webinars. I think that would be a better place for you to understand the different sort of funding opportunities which are available. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Nehal. Very important, because I think there was another question in main chat about list of scholarships for international I guess university scholarships, and I guess again, I'd just say that have a look at the YouTube channel of Project EduAccess, where you'll find the recording of all of these scholarships and university applications. I'll put everything in chat towards the end of the session, so you can directly access them as well. There's another question which says LSC also has gender studies research. Is it good?
I mean, I can't say if it's good or bad, but I would say that it's slightly different from a taught program. So if you would say that there's a difference between a research and a taught program, the only difference I would say is that research program requires you to take up a lot more modules, which is centered around research methodology. So it will sort of enable you to specialize in quantitative and qualitative methods a lot more, depending on which sort of modules you take. So for instance, a taught program would just have one module on research methods. That's true for taught programs across all UK universities, but research programs would have at least two core modules, and then they would also have a lot more options for you to end up choosing from modules which would sort of help you, develop this on sense of like how to do research, but of course with like your area of interest. So I think that's the difference. A good or bad, I think somebody who's done that program would be able to advise you better. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know much about the program specifically, but I think, as Nehal said, you just need to see whether you want to do a research master's or a taught master's, and that would determine a lot of the decisions you make. But more broadly, I know that the LSE's gender department is really good, because one of their professors also used to teach me on my master's, and she always had really good things to say about the department. So just going by their words, I would say that
Yeah,
it is a very
no,
good.
definitely.
And they also have that, they also run a blog, I think, and gender or
Yeah.
something like
Yeah,
that.
they have an Instagram page which I follow. It's called LSC Gender Studies, and I think they're pretty active on that as well. So yeah, I would suggest that you look their Instagram page up. Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah.
There's this question on the Erasmus Joint Doctorate Program. You're right. There isn't, and I think that was just a typo in the slide. So there's no Erasmus Joint Doctorate Program. It's only the Masters, the joint program, I think, has has been defunded or they've stopped that. So apologies for that. I'll edit the PPT when I upload the recording. Then another question is, how important is it to have work experience for PhD, ideally to make our application stand out, and what are other factors that can do that? You don't necessarily need to have work experience in order to apply for a PhD. I directly applied from my undergrad to my master's to a PhD, so I didn't really have any work experience. What I did have was that I had like done work in gender. So the modules that I actually, not the modules that I'd taken, because we didn't have any modules on gender either, but just generally the kind of work I was doing in terms of the research I was doing or internships I was doing, a lot of it was focused on gender and women's rights and all of that. So I was able to demonstrate that I have an interest in gender, and that's how I did my master's in gender studies. And then when I was making my PhD application, it was in a different department, but I wanted to focus on gender, and my master's in gender studies helped to say that, I have a disciplinary background in that, and I have a background in law, and I want to bring those two together. I had, for a PhD, I think the fact that I had a master's where I'd written a dissertation, I'd written research papers was enough. And some people also have publications, but again, it's not required. I didn't have any like formal journal publications. I had like some articles that I'd written or reports that I was part of, but I did not have any applications. So, sorry, I didn't have any formal publications. So I think again for a PhD, they do want to see whether you have, training in research methodology, writing, and all of that more than work experience. Of course, if you have it, then it's good. But I think because you're embarking on a very serious research project that's long term and requires you to do heavy writing, that is what they want to really see as opposed to, work experience. I think work experience would be more important for something like scholarship applications for maybe evening where they, want you to have a certain number of work experience, and that would maybe make your application stand out more. Nehal, if you have anything to add to that.
No, I mean, I haven't done PhD applications, so
Yeah.
I wouldn't know as much, but yeah.
Okay, there's I think a more general question, which is what kind of certification are we supposed to get for the English language requirement from our grad colleges? Maybe Nehal, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I think it's very it's been the same for over the years. It's usually IELTS, TOEFL that they accept. IELTS I think is more accepted in the UK. TOEFL is more accepted in Canada. I'm not sure about what happens in States, but like yeah. So these are, and now there are some other standardized tests as well. A lot of colleges conduct their own internal tests. There was some test with like Duolingo, which also started coming up online during the pandemic. I don't know if it's still in operation, but like, yeah, these are some of the tests which are out there. But a lot of universities are okay. For instance, both SOAS and Cambridge were okay. If I gave them a letter from my university back in college saying that, oh, her language of instruction was in English and that, da, da, da. And also like I produced a mark sheet from my 12th grade which said that, okay, I had this much marks in English, which is like, yeah. So I think that usually works, but like a lot of colleges are still very anal about it, and they might still expect you ki, hame chahiye, like we want it. So then you might have to give it to them, and they might have to appear for the exam. So yeah, just that.
Yeah, I would also say that, ask for waivers as soon as you're starting your application. And generally, it's better to ask for a waiver much before the deadline. So write to your course, coordinator, convener, that email IDs are usually on the course website. Reach out to them, ask if there's any way you can get a waiver, and if you can show your transcripts or the fact that you've done education English or a letter from your current university to attest your language proficiency, to then ask for waivers. And again, if the university doesn't require you to submit your score during application, I would always suggest you wait,
Yeah.
apply, and then only if your offer comes with the condition that you need to have an English language test, take it only at that point, because otherwise just try for waivers, because these are very expensive tests and it's not always right to take them. Um, Another question is, sadly, to be a TA, most universities require English language certifications from international students as part of the law. Yes. Oh no. I don't think so. I don't know, Nehal, if you've heard of anything like that.
No, even I don't think so. I think the fact that you're by default doing a course doesn't that sort of I don't know, make you eligible? Again, I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think usually TAs are appointed when you've already started your degree abroad. So usually PhD students are taken on as TAs, but I think in some places MPhil and master students as well. And
Yeah.
since you're already on the program, I don't think you need to take a
Yeah.
language test separately. But if you meant RA, which is like research assistantships as opposed to teaching assistantships, then for RA positions also you don't need English language test from what I know. Again, Nehal, do you want to?
No, I'm sorry. I don't think I know anything like that.
Yeah, from what I know is that you don't need these certificates. You just apply for the role as
Yeah.
was a job application, and if
But
they you, then it's different.
sorry, but yeah, again, as you mentioned, Misbah, I think a good thing would be like you wait, and if you get the offer, and then these are questions that you shoot to the university asking that, do you have these specific requirements? Then you make a call if you
Mhm.
want to take it or if you don't want to take it. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Another question is, how early should we contact supervisors? 5 to 6 months before application begins? Yeah, probably that would be a good time because supervisors are very busy. Sorry, professors are generally very busy, may not reply on time. You may have to send a few follow-up emails. You may not get the kind of response that you want. And sometimes it may be a back and forth to really get them either to talk to you or engage with your research. So I would say 5, 6 months is a good time. And sometimes what happens if you do it late is that they've already taken on other students and then they just tell you that, even though I really like your proposal, I'm already full, I won't be able to take on any more people. So definitely do that. Sorry, quite a few So there's two PhD questions in my DM. I'll take that slightly later, but first maybe we can take another question, which is my proposal could fit into different disciplines, including gender studies. Sorry,
Yes.
excuse me, sorry. Excuse me.
Misbah, you let me know if you want to take if you want me to
I'm
take it.
fine, sorry. So my proposal could fit into different disciplines, including gender studies, public health, and sociology, since it's interdisciplinary. Could you please elaborate on choosing a discipline and department when your interests are interdisciplinary? What should be the priority factors in shortlisting? Nehal, do you want to?
I don't know. If you're asking from a master's point of view, I think what would again be important is, as Misbah said, like, looking at it, does it come from a social sciences or like a humanities sort of lens? I think that would be important to know. Secondly, also looking at the kind of modules that they offer. A lot of them usually have their preliminary reading list up as well. So I think that also sometimes helps sort of just gauging the kind of, uh, discussions that the classroom would hold, the kind of, the frameworks that would sort of be evoked during the study. So I think that's one thing. The third thing would also be, of course, like what sort of research you're interested in doing ultimately. I know that a lot of times you're not sure what sort of lens or what sort of theoretical framework you'll be using during your, final research project, like your thesis. But like just having like a broader idea. Like for instance, I knew that I was always more drawn towards theories around socio and anthro as a discipline. So I was like, okay, I want to go into this sort of field more. And that's why I ended up choosing gender studies as a discipline over, let's say, gender law or gender development kind of a discipline. So I think for me, these three factors would matter the most. Ms. What do you have anything to add?
No, I think that's broadly it. I'm also mindful of time because we
Yeah,
have crossed the 1 hour time. So,
yeah,
if Nehal, you're okay staying on a few
yeah,
more
yeah, I'm
minutes,
fine. Yeah,
maybe we can take all the master's questions and then I can take the PhD ones at the end. And if you have to head off,
yeah,
you can
yeah.
do that. Um, Okay, so that's a question. I had a small query regarding the admin hassle Nehal mentioned. How does one gauge that a specific department is well equipped from the website solely, or you'd recommend contacting alumni? Also, the response to the emails from for both prospective supervisors, etc., is quite uncertain at times. So, should one still go on to apply?
Okay, so for the admin hassle bit, yeah, talk to the alumni. I think that's the way to go because no university is going to be like, oh, we are understaffed and we don't have the resources to be able to support our students and we underpay our people and hence they're burnt out. Nobody's going to do that. So don't look at their website, talk to the alumni. I think that's the way to go. And again, you should see how important that is for you. Like for me, the administrative bit was important, but it was not like a make or break kind of situation, right? So that was one thing. The second thing is for supervision, again, if it's related to masters, most universities don't require you to contact supervisors at all. You just get into the master's program. For PhD, some universities require you to have a supervisor before you enter the program. That is, that you contact your super. And I would ideally suggest, and this is what I've usually heard from my peers who are applying for a PhD, that it's always good to have contacted a supervisor before you enter into the program, simply because one, you get to know if the university has funding for that kind of program this year, if you're looking for funding. Two, if the professor is taking supervisees or is taking PhD students for that year, because a lot of time the supervisors or the professors are really overworked and they have a lot of students, so they don't take up PhD students during that intake, then your application just goes waste. Like it might not even be considered, even though it's a very good application. So I think it's always better to contact, even though let's say they haven't gotten back, maybe shoot an email to like the admissions team and see if you just want to know about the general things. If the department is taking applications intake, if this is your area of research interest, and if that is something that the department has people for you to supervise on. I think these are some general queries that you can shoot to the department. So yeah, but either ways, having some sort of understanding is good. But even then, I think if it doesn't have an application fee, go and apply. If it has, then I think you'll have to weigh some of these things as and when you go. So yeah. Do universities accept digital transcripts? I think somebody had already mentioned. Yes, they do. I haven't ever submitted any hard copy. Yeah, okay, so I think this is something you can take, Misbah. Are taking, okay, you've already answered that on chat. Can you please shed light over drafting email for approaching potential supervisor? How do you ideally look? Okay, I think that's something that you can take, Misbah.
Yeah, I'll just take that again with the PhD questions, but I think there were a few questions about LOR, so maybe we
Yeah.
can take that. So I think there's one that says, can I consider getting an LOR from a supervisor at work? I have 5+ work experience. And then the second question related to that is, for interdisciplinary programs, is it okay to get LORs from faculty who have taught me but are not from the department of my undergraduate major?
I think yes is to both. First, yes, simply because if you worked so much, universities understand that you've had that sort of gap in your academic engagement. So that's all right. But again, I think it really depends from course to course. If some courses are research heavy and they would require you to attest some sort of understanding in research, they might specifically mention that we need one academic LOR at least. So again, look at the website, get an understanding. But if it doesn't mention anything of that sort, it's okay for you to take an LOR from somebody that you've worked for or worked with. Again, maybe ask them specifically to highlight your skills along like research, along your understanding of like critical comprehension and stuff like that. That would really be useful and that would strengthen your profile. That's one thing. The second thing is, yes, you can get it from a different department. I don't think universities care. Yeah, it's just that it should show some sort of sustained engagement. Don't get a LOR for somebody who you've known for like 2 weeks or 2 days, or like engaged in a course with like for 2 days. So like I think that's the only sustained engagement is the only thing that the universities sort of care about, and that should be reflected in your LOR. So yeah.
Yeah, perfect. I wouldn't add anything else to it because I agree. I think one more thing about just the faculty who, is not from your major or, is when you're applying for interdisciplinary programs would be just that you let them know in that email that you're applying for a different different course, let them know the details of the course, and so that they can in their LOR show that you are interested in that interdisciplinary program, and that you demonstrated that through your engagements in class and all of that, and so that they are also aware of it, instead of just focusing on the subject that they've taught you. Okay. I'm just gonna start taking the PhD questions now. I think unless there is any other questions that we've not taken. Again, if there's any questions, you can put them in chat or just raise your hand, but I will start. So there is a question. Okay, actually this is a mixed question, so I'm just going to read it out loud. It's come in my DM. My undergraduate training is in sociology and anthropology. Gender happens to be one of the vertices that I'm interested in, but I'll probably do a doctoral program that is at the intersection of gender and other themes. In the long term, my PhD will probably be in disciplinary fields like sociology rather than just gender. Do you think it's better to go for a good master's program in gender and then then a disciplinary PhD, or a mediocre program in the discipline itself? Does shifting from a specific field or the discipline affect PhD prospects?
Hmm. I think again, like it really depends. So, again, so if you think that you do have a good understanding of the different, like debates on gender, the different theoretical frameworks, the different sort of, like I was mentioning, like the different theories around gender, if you think that your theoretical background, your understanding of the current debates, and your understanding of the, like the different frameworks and the different intersectionalities is good, then, and if you're confident, then maybe go apply for a PhD directly. Personally, for me, I felt that that wasn't the case for me, right? Like I knew a lot of these theories on paper, but I wasn't able to draw a lot of these connections, right? Like, for instance, it's very eye-opening for me when I studied the intersections between transness and disability in a certain way. Of course, like on paper, I knew the intersections that would exist, but like the different theories that have sort of been like the different ways in which it's been theorized about transness and disability and how the two fields connect with each other. So I think there are a lot of eye-opening moments for you during your masters as well, but it really depends if what sort of depth that you also want to go into. That was the sort of depth that I wanted to go into during my masters because I was passionate about it. So that is why I ended up choosing one. And second, I felt like I lacked the kind of rigorous theoretical training because I came from a certain context, and India, even though I did end up taking modules on gender during my undergrad, I didn't think that it prepared me for like a direct PhD program, although I was interested in like PhD at that point of time. So yeah.
Yeah. I completely agree with Nehal, and I think thinking from a PhD point of view, sort of what you want to do, like if you know you want to do a PhD program, then I think first you should go for a good MA program, irrespective of which field it is in. So, don't go for a mediocre MA program in any discipline. Go for whatever is the best for you, whether it's in gender studies or whether it's in, sociology or anthropology. I agree with, again, so Neha's already covered sort of what you want from the program, right? And I think one more thing that I like really helped me because I moved from one discipline to another is that I found a really good network of people who were focusing on gender and sexuality, which I wouldn't have found if I'd just gone from my LLB to my master's in law and then my PhD in law, and I would have just been stuck in that sort of legal network. But I think doing a master's in gender studies really gave me access to a network of people who are doing work on gender. Some maybe from a legal perspective, but a lot of them from different perspectives. And I think it's very helpful to have that community, have that network, because you bring certain you bring a certain lens of, say, for example, law in my case, or for you, it might be anthropology or sociology, or it may be like even your identity, whatever that may be, that's a different perspective. And, there are other people bringing different perspectives, and having that community really, I think, like helps you in the PhD that you're doing, or even generally in terms of like well-being. It's good to be part of that community. I think I personally found like the best of the people. It was a really like feminist space where people were really interested in, building you up and like working on you. And I think I took that the most from my master's program, finding a space that was truly like feminist and, with people who were just so amazing. And I think if that's something you want as well, you want that community, you want that network, that in itself is also a good reason to do it, because you wouldn't find that in other places. Um, and then, of course, you can do your PhD in any other program, whether that's sociology, anthropology, and you can focus on gender, and that there may be a few students working on gender in that. Um, so yeah, I think a good master's program is definitely, the priority, whether it's in gender studies or whether it's in any other discipline would depend on what your interest is. And then a PhD, you can change your discipline. It's not a problem at all. So there's another question that says, if one's undergraduate program is research intensive with thesis and term papers, and they have research experience as well, is it recommended to apply for a PhD program to the UK, or does having a master's program, especially taught ones from Indian universities, still help? Again,
Yeah.
yeah,
Sorry, go ahead, Misbah.
no, go ahead.
Yeah, I think again, I would reiterate what I said in the beginning because, again, like if you are, okay, so this is what happened, right? So when I did because I was working in feminist spaces for 2 years before I ended up doing my master's, I still felt like like I still found it very challenging to engage with a lot of the debates that were happening in class. I still found it challenging, and like challenging, I mean in a good way, right? To be able to draw these connections that were being made within feminist theory, simply because a lot of these debates happen very differently. One, in India, although they're also extremely important. Two, India still is yet to have like a fully developed field around gender studies, at least theoretically, right? Like there are a few universities which offers masters. Like for instance, I was supposed to go and do a master's in women's studies at TIS, which again I feel is a great master's program. But if I have to compare it with the kind of understandings that I was looking for in a master's program, I would still prefer a master's program in the UK over that, given that I had a funding in the UK. Like I am taking into consideration all of those aspects as well, right? Like it's a privilege to be able to say that, oh, I want to go and study in the UK, right? So not taking away from that fact, but also there are some good Indian universities which are doing that. I know Ambedkar is one. I know Savitribai Phule is the other one. TIS has a good program. So you really need to weigh your options. Let's say if I did not have the funding opportunity in the UK, I would have probably ended up doing a master's either at Ambedkar or TIS. So that would have been the choice that I would have taken. So one, funding, two, what you're looking for in a theoretical program, and does the program so maybe comparing the two programs in the UK and India would help. So yeah, I think those are my 2 cents of advice on this. Yeah.
And again, just from a PhD perspective, I've seen it happen very rarely, actually never, where in humanities and social sciences, students are able to do a PhD directly after undergraduate degree. That happens in STEM courses, but very rarely in humanities and social sciences. And generally, they do prefer that you have that you have a master's, where again you are focusing on dissertation research methodologies a lot more rigorously. You can apply for a PhD program if you want. Again, if you're saying that your undergraduate has all of that extensive research, then maybe also apply to a master's as a backup, just in case, you don't get a PhD program, and, you get a master. Sometimes universities actually themselves say that, when you make an application and they say that they might come back to you to say that they'd rather consider you for the master's program, and then you can apply for a PhD after that. So maybe if you want to keep that option open, you can as well. But again, in my experience, again, it's a limited experience. I have not seen anyone, especially, if you've studied in India, get into a PhD program right after their undergraduate degree. So it would be a bit of a risk. Okay, oh my God, so many questions. Sorry, Nehal, I know we're like...
No, that's all right. I'm happy to stay back. Yeah. I think there's one specific question on LOR for PhD by Tanya. Maybe you can take that, Ms. Bhatt.
Is it good to submit academic LOR from our bachelor's professors for PhD program? Can one also submit it from the professor from outside university with whom one has done research assistantship for a couple of months? Okay, so I think for this one, you need to see what the course website says. So for some universities, they strictly want academic reference letters, which means these have to be professors who have taught and graded you formally as part of your education, which means that somebody who's taught you in masters or somebody who's taught you in bachelors would be the people to write your recommendation letter. So even if there's a professor who you've done work with, does not count as an academic as an academic referee, or would not be an academic LOR. So you need to see what the course says. If the course allows flexibility, if they say that it can be any LOR, then you can, of course, have it from somebody who's done your bachelor's with, and somebody who you worked with. But if it does say that it has to be academic, then you'll have to ask people who've taught and graded you formally. So again, it really depends on the requirement of the course. Sorry, there was a question, my DM a little up, so I'm just going to scroll to that. Would you say that work on gender studies as an English PhD is more employable than gender studies PhD itself, as English is an established field? And then does the PhD admission very strictly depend on distinction and masters? Is it more flexible? I don't know about employability. To be honest, humanities and social sciences is just generally hard to get employed. Whether you do a PhD in English or gender studies or any other history in any other humanities or social sciences subject, it's very difficult to get employment generally. I think I mean, again, this is not backed by anything, but intuitively I would think that a PhD in gender studies opens up more avenues because it's much more interdisciplinary, as opposed to a PhD in English, which has a very specific disciplinary focus. So if you've done gender studies, you can still move to other disciplines, whether it's history, whether it's or sort of do any job that focuses on gender, whereas in English you might be constrained. But again, this is just what I think intuitively. It's not backed by any experience or research. So I think then the decision should just be dependent on either you reach out to people who have done a PhD in English and gender studies and maybe see what they think as people who've either done it or are currently doing it, and then compare and make that decision. Maybe that would be more helpful. Oh, sorry. Listen, my department thinks I'm not moving enough. Then okay, there's a question about drafting email to potential supervisor. So I have sent in chat the link to our website, which is the Project EduAccess resource material link. In that, you will find guides to writing application documents, including a guide on research proposals. Within that, there is a section on approaching a supervisor, and it has guidance on what all that email needs to include and what all drafts you must or can attach in that email. So I would recommend you have a look at that guide because it's a lot more comprehensive and really talks you through all of those things. And then I've also sent a link to the YouTube channel where you'll find a recording of this session as well as all other workshops we've done on scholarships and university applications. Okay, sorry. Again, there's a question in my DM. I've completed my undergrad and postgrad studies in humanities, but I wanted to study social sciences and preferably political thought and sociology. I wanted to understand how could one justify this, considering all my previous research work has been in literary studies. Would you know if paper presentations work? Nehal, do you want to take this?
Um, I don't know. So I know a lot of people who have moved fields. For instance, I was working very closely with two people who were applying for evening and masters this year, and they were they've done their work in like history and other stuff, and now they're suddenly interested in like actually accidentally political thought specifically. And so I feel like it really depends on how you construct and present your profile, right? So, especially when you're writing a SOP, if you think that you can make a strong case about the fact that, you are able to draw the connections of what you've done in your life and what has led you to this, and what sort of experience that you already come with, and it sort of makes up for a convincing statement of purpose for the college. I think that should work. And as Ms. Bud already mentioned earlier, I don't think colleges abroad are as anal about like what sort of field that you specifically come from until unless you like, till the time you're able to back yourself up with your interest, your passion, your, work that you've already done in the field, and what after that. I think if you're able to map that trajectory well, I think that's what sort of is important. At least that's what I think worked for me in the kind of applications that I did, and I've worked for people who've done applications. So yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add there. I think there was a question. Any advice for a person from STEM background interested in doing a postgraduate in gender studies? Nehal, do you want to start?
Yeah, I know so many people who have done that and who are doing that. So I mean, it's okay if you're from STEM and you get disillusioned by the field. I am not surprised as to why that would not happen. But like jokes aside, I know a lot of people who get into like, interested into the field. And then again, I would reiterate what I said earlier, right? Depends on the kind of case that you make in your profile. Like if you say that, you come from a certain positionality and this what has happened and this is what led to your interest in this field and this is why now you want to transition fields and this is the kind of preliminary work that you've already done which shows your interest, because a lot of times what happens is that people say that I'm interested in this without backing it up with like what led to that interest and what kind of work they've already started to do. They don't expect you to be experts in the field, but at least like some sort of work that you've already done to show that okay, this is why I'm interested and this is what I've done for my interest and this is what I want to do later on. So I think honestly, till the time you're able to show that on your profile, that is all that matters. And there are a lot of people from STEM who do transition fields. Of course, it might be slightly more challenging. I will not take that away, because your academic training is slightly different from people who come from like humanities or social sciences background. But then it really depends on the kind of work that you've already done. And if you've already begun to engage with those sort of debates and readings, I think it'll be much more helpful. And I think you would also be a very good addition to a class, right? Because Ms. also mentioned that a lot of research is now begin to be done on like AI, tech, gender, and given that you're interested in that, I'm not boxing you into the fact that you are probably interested in that, but like just yeah. So yeah, just that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything substantial to add here, but that when I was doing my master's, I had people from computer science background, from
Yeah.
graphic design background. One of my classmates actually has gone to medical school now in the US. So people from just like um, your different fields do end up doing a master's in gender studies. The only thing again that I found them struggling with a little bit, and I referred to this initially as well, is that when you come from a different discipline, just see whether you would be able to keep up with the readings of that discipline. So the problem with, not the problem, but like the master's program at Oxford is designed in a way that it's very humanities specific, very theoretical in nature, and the options that they offer you, and even the modules that you do, they're very humanities specific, and so a lot of the students struggle with that. But one good thing about it was that it allowed you to do a dissertation in any department at Oxford. So my dissertation was supervised by my current law department supervisor. Similarly, like people in the computer science or graphic design, they had supervisors from, I think one of them had a supervisor from the Internet Institute. And so that's one plus as well. So again, which program you choose, you will just have to be careful about that and really do your research on, if when you are making that switch, which one would actually help you and which one would you be able to thrive in. I think that's all I'd say. Is there any other question? I think there was one that came, but I just responded to that in chat. But I don't know, Nehal, if you had any other thoughts on, research internships and think tanks and organizations, or if they're better than RA-ships with the faculties or vice versa.
Sorry, I don't think I have anything to add to that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's just that I think research generally is good, whether you're applying for a PhD or a master's.
Yeah.
If you have research experience, that's good, because at the end of the day, you're applying for you're applying for an
Academic.
academic program.
Yeah.
And so if you have research experience, that's good. Work experience actually really helps when you're applying for scholarships, because it demonstrates that along with your academics, you were able to do other things and excel in that. And you're able to demonstrate a lot more qualities. Um, I think that's about it. If there's any question that was sent in chat or in DM that we've not taken up, maybe you can put it in chat again. Or if you want, you can just raise your hand and ask your question directly. If not, then maybe we can end the session now. We're already, way past, we're 30 minutes over. So if nothing, then I will end with again, the resources that I mentioned, I will share, which I think I already shared in chat before. So one is the link to our website, which has guides on writing application documents, again, ranging from LOR to SOP to research proposal to statement of purpose for universities. And then second is our YouTube channel. So all of the universities application workshops that we've done and scholarship application workshops are available on our YouTube channel. So these are the ones from 2024 and 2023. So do have a look at that. I think that's it. Nehal, thank you so much for joining us and for staying on for so long and for really being such a wonderful panelist. And thank you everyone who joined us, and all the best for your applications.
Thanks, Misbah. All the best, everyone. Bye.
See you. Bye.